The day is finally here.
Yeah, it's been a while since we've had a special episode, and I kind
Yes.
of missed them. So this week, we've got something way different. And when you asked me like, "Is this do we want to do this?" And I'm like, I never thought, like, I would never have thought of this. But you're just often going and finding these unique companies to, or I guess it's not.
Organization, I
It's an
guess.
organization that we all know, but at
All
least for
meaning
me.
all EV geeks.
Yeah, but to me, it's like it's an acronym that you throw onto something, and then an announcement happens. You're like, oh wait,
It's
there's
an actual
more.
organization.
Yeah, there's an actual organization, and that there is more to know about it, which is delightful because that keeps us going. Because every week I learned something new. So here I'm about to learn something incredibly new, uh, or more than I knew, I guess. So I'm Phil Royle. I'm one of the podcast co-hosts here, along with Ed, who he'll introduce himself. I've been doing content creation. Do I continue to downplay my number of years? Am I
Keep
down to
doing the
10 years
Benjamin
now?
Button thing. Yeah.
Yeah, 10 years of automotive journalism and content creation, when really it's double that, unfortunately. And then I also direct people to thewalkcar.com/store to purchase t-shirts and sweaters and water bottles and hats to help support the blog and the podcast.
Ed Sanchez, 20 plus years in automotive content creation and moderation. Day job, automotive electronics industry analyst, and the Watt Car co-founder and contributor.
So who have you found, Ed?
I will allow our esteemed guest to introduce himself, and then I look forward to a very engaging and interesting conversation. So, Steve, take it away.
Yeah, Ed, Phil, thanks for introducing and bringing me onto the podcast. Steve Griffith, I'm Executive Director of Regulatory Industry Affairs for the National Electrical Manufacturers Association, or NEMA. So maybe a bit about NEMA. I've been with NEMA now for about almost 13 years, so I guess I'm a seasoned veteran. I serve as the lead for NEMA's mobility sector. NEMA represents over 300 electrical equipment manufacturers that make safe, reliable, efficient products and systems. Our members contribute about 1% of the US GDP, provide about 460,000 American jobs, contributing more than 250 billion to the economy. So obviously, one of our core activities is cutting edge standards across our sectors, which mobility being one of them. We've been around since 1926, and our standards, like the one we're going to talk about, are based on principles of scientific integrity, transparency, openness, and consensus. So the mobility sector, which is the sector that I lead, is basically represents the manufacturers of connected and electrified transportation infrastructure. So they manufacture products that deliver energy back to the grid from an EV, which could be bidirectional, allowing EVs to both send and receive electricity. They also make products that facilitate smart utilization of transportation networks. They also make components that actually go inside a vehicle itself, the motors, the wire, the cable, the generators. So we kind of bring our people together to create the movement to a more connected world, a world powered by electricity. So I'm looking forward to the conversation, but I figured it was good to give you a little background about
Sure.
NEMA. I've been with the association for 13 years. I have an engineering degree by background, so I kind of love this stuff. I guess I'm like yourself, I'm a geek. So this is all good stuff for me, and looking forward to continuing our conversation.
Yeah.
To me, like, I know NEMA because you have like you see the acronym before a lot of things.
Plug types mainly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it doesn't even occur to me that there is something behind that. So now you've said like what you're doing is obviously beyond like a plug
Yep.
standard that goes into this. And this, so Ed, what caught your attention on this? This was the power exporting permitting standard that I
Yeah.
think got your attention.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to give you maybe a little background of how we got to this space, this started. This was a gap on the 2023 American National Standards Institute Electric Vehicle Standards Roadmap. that was a cross-sector coordinating body that objective was to foster coordination and collaboration on standardization matters among public and private sector stakeholders to enable the safe mass deployment of electric vehicles and associated infrastructure in the United States with international cooperation and alignment. So we looked at, the vehicle itself, we looked at the infrastructure and to determine, what are the gaps? And there were a number of gaps that were identified on this roadmap. And NEMA, because we were involved in the roadmap development, power export was one of those gaps. The power export is not covered in any kind of codes or standards when for a mobile EV to export power back to the grid. That's in juxtaposition with a stationary resource or a distributed energy resource like a rooftop solar PV or a battery energy storage system for which permits can be issued due to the fact that the energy power source resource is not mobile. Well, this is actually a gap. And so we decided that this was something that needed to because we're all about advancing the infrastructure needed to grow this market. So we basically raised our hand and said, we'll take on this activity to develop the standard. And so once we basically, mobilized our forces, it took us about a little under a year to actually develop and publish the power export permitting standard.
Okay. I'm curious who some of the other organizations or interests you work with. I'm just, if just going to throw some acronyms out there. I'm guessing like SAE, IBEW. I mean, who all was involved in kind of the formulation and discussion kind of leading up to the standard?
Yeah, so you mentioned SAE. We do work with SAE. Their space is definitely within the vehicle. Their focus is a lot on safety aspects, whereas our forte is more design and performance aspects. But SAE, IEEE, UL, I mean, these are the other standards organizations in this space that were involved in the roadmap development. Each organization, has standards that they agreed, gaps that they agreed to take on. Like, SAE was developing a number of different standards within the vehicle that they're addressing. But when you're getting outside the vehicle to the charge infrastructure, which is what our members manufacture, also with it ties back to the grid, which also, I mean, we have members that build, transformers and switchgear that are needed to make the grid more reliable and resilient. It made sense for NEMA to take the role of this standard on.
Okay. So in terms of the different constituents in this, I'd imagine there's probably some academic, industrial, obviously standards organizations. I mean, could you discuss a little bit of the variety of the different people involved in this?
Yeah, so maybe I'll just kind of give you a little,
hmm
what the standard looks at is it was driven by the premise that you want to make EVSE installations safety while meeting electrical and building code requirements. So there's technical considerations included the need to support the various EVSE configurations, which I can talk about in a little bit, and how these vehicles integrate into the grid operations and address all the complexities with power flow. Our mobility sector members, which include companies like, ABB, General Motors, Schneider Electric, Siemens, Tesla, they manufacture in the space. And it's our mission to be that voice for the manufacturers in that fully connected and electrified sector. So as our products make up these components, the standard was developed as a resource to bolster grid resiliency and to reflect the realities of today's electrification landscape. The standard looks at 3 different configurations to address the gap. It examines existing standards and regulations. There are some in this space that we kind of point to. It provides pathways and processes for power export are indicated and provides recommendations for a power export permit to be issued. This is guidance for like authorities having jurisdiction or utilities, municipalities, and cooperatives to adopt.
Hmm. So I'm curious, does this only apply to AC or also to DC?
Yeah, good question. So there's three kind of core configurations that the
Hmm.
standard describes. One is vehicle to grid DC. That's where the inverter and the smart functions are housed in the electric vehicle supply equipment. This configuration treats the system similarly to other distributed energy resources like solar and wind. There is
Hmm.
the vehicle to grid AC. In that configuration, the inverter and the smart functions are located on board the EV itself. This adds a little bit of complexity to the permitting process.
Hmm.
Then there's a third configuration where it's a split, where it's a V to G AC split. It's a hybrid system where the smart inverter is located on board the EV, but the smart functions are housed inside the electric vehicle supply equipment. So it kind of blends the features of,
So in colloquial terms, the charger, I know
yeah,
engineers bristle at that because
yeah,
that's the incorrect term, but
yeah.
that's the,
So
you know,
there are three different configurations
yeah.
that the standard talks about,
Mhm.
and provides the pathways for permitting on those configurations. But great question.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I guess what really piqued my interest about this is I know this is something that's been talked about kind of more in the abstract or more hypothetically for, I think, probably the better part of a decade. Um, but it seemed a little distant or a little like pie in the sky.
Mhm.
I know previously the CHAdeMO standard, which was developed by TEPCO in Japan,
Mhm.
it had hypothetically it had this capability, but it was a much lower power standard, and it was really only adopted in Japan, and it really, to my knowledge, didn't really make it much outside of Japan in terms of the 2A capability. I'm wondering if that standard is just so kind of, I don't even know the term I'm looking for,
Well,
so outdated that it
I
wasn't
think,
even in
yeah,
consideration, or if you looked at that as
yeah.
kind of a starting point, or
The market's kind of determined where that,
hmm
you mentioned the channel. That's one of the connectors that's been around for a while. But there's
hmm
also, I'm sure you're familiar with the North American chart, the NACS standard, which is
sure.
most of the automakers are adopting now. The major ones like GM and Ford and Tesla have all made announcements. So I think that we're kind of let the market determine where this goes.
Hmm.
We try to be as as agnostic as we can. We just want to
Hmm.
grow the market. I mean,
Sure.
we're in favor of the efforts to deploy and sustain a nationwide electric vehicle charge infrastructure that supports the growing number of consumers who want to choose an EV, right? You need to,
Hmm.
if you're going to choose an EV, you want to know that you can find a charging station.
Hmm.
So we want standardization, we want interoperability to allow for communication and coordination between the vehicle, the charging station and the grid operator to
Hmm.
maximize the benefit and convenience for the vehicle owners without putting undue stress on the distribution system. So that's kind of
Hmm.
our mantra. So I'm sure that the market will determine where it goes, but I think the NACS is where it's leading.
Okay. I know. I don't mean to cut you off, Phil, if you want to jump in and have some questions, but I got a few more.
Well, the only question, I mean, the question that's on top of my mind is like, so you've come in, you've created like a standard for this, like vehicle to grid or
Vehicle to home, I guess.
yeah, or vehicle to home.
Exactly.
But there's been a couple companies that have already been doing that,
Hmm.
and I always think back to Tesla was part of Charin when
Hmm.
they were developing a plug standard, and then Tesla went off and did their own thing. And then that created mass confusion for
Hmm.
the better part of, I don't know, let's say a
Decade.
decade. And now we all ended up on what Tesla's thing was, which was not what they were discussing at the beginning of the conversation. So to me, we've got Ford, we've got GM already doing this. Tesla, which has said, well, they're not going to do it, but you said that they're part of
Yeah.
this.
Hmm.
And they've kind of indicated they might do it, but not really. Like, you don't really know where they stand on that. But the ball's already rolling in several courts. did this incorporate like what Ford and GM have already begun, or is there going to be like of the
There's a
few people
clean
that have
sheet. Yeah.
purchased into this,
Mhm.
are they going to kind of be stranded assets in this?
New ecosystem.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like how does that work out?
No, I mean, you mentioned GM and Ford. I'm familiar with those products, and GM is actually one of our members that's actually working with us on the standard. So um, our standards evolve, right? I mean, they're
Mhm.
in this landscape, we look at what we could do to improve on it. So there's going to be a lot of next steps as we move forward with this, right? To your point, we don't want to have these stranded assets. So, it's we're talking to automakers like Ford and Honda. I've had recent conversations with them about the standard, right? And they see the idea. This is it's great because it's a document that provides everything in one document versus going to different standards. A lot of good feedback on that. But people will have to familiarize themselves with the requirements, align their operations, with the requirements. Utilities need to look about how do you adopt your permitting frameworks that are established by the standard. Manufacturers that we're talking to are looking to ensure that their products meet the performance and safety requirements. So that the big advantage of a company like GM or Tesla being involved as the standards develop, they know they can help to develop the standard so it helps align with their product development, right?
Mhm.
So, and then obviously you want to make sure that we're keeping safety at forefront, because as EVs move beyond infrastructure, they become mobile energy storage devices, right, that interact with the grid. So that there's important safety standards that are also crucial because you don't want the grid to have disruptions, and you want
Mhm.
to you want to maintain that confidence in this technology.
Okay. Um, I just had a thought, but so let's see what. Oh, actually, yeah. So I know what I was going to ask. So being an electrical engineer, I'm sure you could correct me on this, but my understanding is globally there are basically two. I know I'm painting with the broom here, but there are basically two global electrical standards. There's 60 hertz and 50 hertz.
Right.
So the US is 60 hertz.
Mhm.
That would also include Canada, Mexico, parts of Central and South America, but a lot of the world is 50 hertz. So I guess my question is, do do your standards do other countries or other I guess either regulatory bodies or industry consortiums voluntarily adopt
Yeah.
NEMA standards, or how? I'm just wondering kind of
Yeah,
how that
no,
works.
good point. Good question. So our standards
Hmm.
are completely voluntary, right?
Hmm.
So we encourage their adoption.
Hmm.
We hope that they're used and observed by manufacturers, EV owners, utilities, and trade associations. Our
Hmm.
membership spans North American manufacturers. So your question about 60 hertz, right?
Hmm.
So the idea is that we try to harmonize requirements across Canada and Mexico, right? It makes it a lot easier for a manufacturer to build the one set of harmonized requirements,
Hmm.
different requirements for Canada and Mexico. So we do a lot of collaboration on harmonization of our standards across the borders to,
Hmm.
to help, streamline requirements and make it easier for markets to move forward. So, and I
Hmm.
think that's where we're going to go with this.
Hmm.
We have good relationships with our sister organizations both in Canada and Mexico to talk
Hmm.
about these things.
Hmm.
So yeah, definitely.
I'm just kind of curious, kind of continuing on with that theme. If if there were any kind of prototype or trial efforts with this, either in Europe or Japan or other areas globally that you looked at and said, "Oh, they've started to implement this here. What could we learn from this? What
Yeah,
could we improve? What went wrong? That sort of thing."
yeah, good point. I mean, the standard is just, as
Hmm.
you as you know, is just recently published, so nothing affirmative yet.
Hmm.
We are talking to, external stakeholders to familiarize everyone with the requirements of the standard and how do we align their operations to it. So I think more will come in the weeks and months ahead as more and more people learn about the standard and learn about what's in the standard and how to adopt it. I think
Mhm.
there's a huge benefit for this as you're starting to turn EVs into mobile energy storage units and the power homes, buildings, and the grid itself. So I think there's a huge upside and impact for this on the economic side, which I'm happy to talk about maybe this in a separate thread.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think the hope is, I mean, the kind of the big picture I've heard from V to G or V to H is grid stability, stabilization during, peak use periods, everyone's running their AC or whatever.
Yeah.
And also potentially, and again, I'm sure this is going to vary by region or utility provider,
Hmm.
is and I'm sure a lot of users hope for this, is they'll get a credit back for the power that the utility draws out of their
Yeah.
EV or their battery pack, that they'll get a credit on their bill for that. And I'm wondering in terms of like, so a big component of this beyond just like the hardware and the battery is the communication protocol and kind of, I imagine the standardization on
Yeah.
that level. And I'm just wondering if you could speak a little
Yeah.
bit about
No,
that.
it's good. You hit on the points,
Hmm.
the introduction of the standard was a significant step towards grid resilience, right? You're enabling an EV to act as a power export distributed energy resource. Utilities can tap into a new pool of energy storage that can be leveraged during peak demand or emergencies. Um, this reduces the strain on the grid, enhances the stability of energy supplies, and helps utilities defer costly infrastructure upgrades. The second benefit is for EV owners, right? They can now sell power back to the grid, opening new revenue streams, creating financial incentives, so like charging off peak at night, for example,
Hmm.
while you're also supporting utilities to maintain that grid stability. So the idea by adopt this standard, utilities can facilitate the growth of the electric vehicle market and support the wider transition to a clean, sustainable, more reliable, and resilient energy future. So that dual economic incentive can foster a more robust market for V to G capable
Hmm.
vehicles, the
Hmm.
EVSEs, accelerating its adoption. So that's the idea. We're trying to produce a consistent, reproducible, permitting process for the various configurations I talked about that
Hmm.
utilities can adopt across different jurisdictions, assuring uniformity in how power export from the EVSE is evaluated and authorized. We look at, there's kind of five key domains. It's performance, communication, electrical, cybersecurity, interconnection. So that's kind of
Hmm.
what we standardize on, to your point.
Hmm. Um, how how is this communicate? So in terms of your membership, I know it's obviously the manufacturers of electrical equipment. Um, is any of your communication, does any of it go to either regional or local, basically electricians, or I guess they would be members of certain organizations. Like how is the standard propagated throughout the industry?
Yeah,
Like, hey, here are the new guidelines. If you're,
excellent
NEMA
point. Yeah,
member,
yeah.
you need to follow these. Yeah.
Excellent point. We actually have a field rep program. We have four
Hmm.
field reps, actually five field reps that cover the four corners of the country. They align with the various code authorities. They're actually the boots
Hmm.
on the ground that actually get in front of code authorities, local jurisdictions to talk about the standard, to help educate on what the features are of the standard.
Hmm.
So they're actually the boots on the ground. They deal a lot with the people as the standards being implemented. We also have a relationship with the various utility organizations, right? There's the investor-owned utilities, there's the
Hmm.
cooperatives and the
Hmm.
rural co-ops. I'm going to be at the vehicle, the grid integration week early May in California, talking to a lot of utilities and other stakeholders about the standard. So it's the utilities, it's the code officials, it's the authorities, it's the municipalities. We
Hmm.
also have state, government relations people that get out there in front of regulatory and legislative bodies. So we have a pretty wide net of, plus the members, right? We have
Hmm.
member footprint, pretty good member footprint across the country, and we can leverage the members as well to help kind of utilize their network to help push the standard out as well.
Hmm. How soon do you expect this to actually be implemented? Like to, I mean, I know a lot of it kind of depends on utility adoption,
Mhm.
and I know like on a larger level. I mean, again, I'm just speaking off the top of my head what I know. There's KaiSo, there's um, ERCOT. There's a different kind of regional grids. How's that integrated into that? And I mean, how I guess what other measures need to be in place for this to start being implemented like in the real world?
Yeah, there's the household level and there's the utility level, right? Let's
Hmm.
talk about the household first.
Hmm.
At the household level, a key component for the incorporation of the necessary infrastructure is the infrastructure behind the wall. We term as EV ready, right? And that
Hmm.
means the household has sufficient electrical capacity via an appropriately sized electrical panel, a dedicated branch circuit, a conduit, and wiring from the panel to the EV charging station. So it's kind of, the infrastructure behind the wall, EV
Hmm.
ready. And the International Energy Conservation Code, or the IECC, sets the standards for energy efficiency in the buildings.
Hmm.
In the 2024 IECC, there's an appendix that has the EV ready requirements for commercial and residential dwellings. We were instrumental in getting that included in the appendix, and now we're out there pushing for states to adopt the code, or municipalities that want to get out ahead of the code to adopt the
Hmm.
code to get their infrastructure ready to accommodate EV charging. At the
Hmm.
utility level, there are programs like EV Make Ready that support the development of charge infrastructure by reducing the upfront cost that would be borne by developers or customers. This includes costs like trenching,
Hmm.
uh, infrastructure upgrades like transformers and distribution lines. So those are things that need to be happening at the household and the utility level to help implement, power export permitting.
Okay. So I don't know if this would have anything to do with it, but like I don't know if I could make it work with my current configuration. I only have a 100 amp panel. I'm in a townhouse, so it's a
Mhm.
little smaller. I know
Yeah,
Phil's got a 200 amp panel. I mean, my guess would be as the minimum requirement or recommendation would be a 200 amp panel that
yeah,
does have the two-way capability.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, the idea with the code is that obviously you can retrofit existing building to do it, but if for
Hmm.
new construction, the idea is that if you're building a new residential and commercial, you want to have that already included when you're
Hmm.
building it. That
Sure.
way, if the owner wants to install an EV charging station, they've already got the infrastructure behind
Hmm.
the walls to accommodate it. So
So is
Sure.
the whole idea, this may be, I ask very simple, stupid questions. So is the idea to kind of future proof the whole industry?
exactly.
So like if this didn't happen, you end up with one company doing one thing, another company doing another thing, and then the house can't support it, but this other house can't support it, and this grid can't, and this grid can. Like how far out do you look in something, designing something like this, so you don't have, because I could see like having immediate chaos, like you've got Hyundai doing this and Honda doing this and whatever, and there'd be immediate chaos. But then, like kind of with NACS and CCS, it kind of standardized itself. There came a point where everybody just kind of agreed that one thing was better, but that took 10 years of craziness. Uh, and now presumably we're thinking ahead. I don't really know how much far out this is. Like how far out would does this then look? Does this standard look? It says, okay, now we're going to put our line in the sand here. Are you looking out 20 years from now, potentially, and what EVs could be, and trying to make a standard that can grow
Yeah,
with
our
all of
With the
this?
market, yeah.
standards are going to be iterative. They're going to evolve. We've already got some suggestions on this next revision. So we hope to have another revision done by the end of the year. The industry is evolving. I mean,
Hmm.
there are some states that are way out ahead of other states. I saw a story in my news feed that California now has more EV chargers than gasoline pumps, right?
Hmm.
Um, um, Technology will evolve. There's regulatory requirements to look at. There's safety protocols. There's research and development on different technologies for, like, battery chemistry for EVs. So it's an evolving market.
Hmm.
You have to kind of stay engaged with stakeholders. I invite, anyone that has an interest in our standards to contact us directly. We do intend to take this to an ANSI standard. And an ANSI standard, you're opening up to include not only manufacturers, but users and general interest groups. Um, there's a lot of opportunities, but I think everyone has to work together. I think we're
Hmm.
starting to see that within NEMA, um, broadly, we can't do it ourselves, so we're collaborating where we can with other people, other players in the space. We're getting more involved at the states because of the states, a lot of activity with the states, they're looking at this stuff.
Hmm.
So it's never a dull moment, I guess.
Hmm.
I don't think you can wait 20 years.
So one thing I'm kind of curious about is in my day job, a big kind of term and buzzword that's there's a lot of discussion surrounding is software-defined vehicles.
Mhm.
I'm just wondering with this initiative specifically, how big of a role does software play relative to hardware? I know it involves both, but
Yeah,
it seems to me that if you're talking about kind of an evolving standard or revisions, a lot of that would entail software.
yeah, and something we're actually looking at, software-defined vehicles, because
Hmm.
a lot of
Hmm.
makers are looking at software-defined vehicles and how does that play in? And I know there's some challenges that need to be addressed with software-defined vehicles because a lot of vehicle manufacturers do over-the-air updates
Hmm.
when they find bugs,
Hmm.
and you have to make sure you distinguish between a safety update versus a non-safety update. And I
Hmm.
don't, that's still something that's
What does it
being
say? Critical versus non-critical. Yeah.
critical versus non-critical, right?
Hmm.
Entertainment versus, breaks or something like that.
Hmm.
So that's still kind of an emerging topic, but the software-defined vehicle still got to communicate, still got to talk to infrastructure, right? I think that's
Hmm.
where we're looking at, well, how do our standards, for communications for with vehicles, whether they're EV or non-EV, how do they communicate with infrastructure?
Hmm.
So we've actually got some standards that talk basically about connected vehicle roadside equipment, for example, how a vehicle communicates that you're in a school zone or something like that. So I
Hmm.
think it's coming, but I think still emerging a little bit. But I think infrastructure is going to play a key role in that technology, and we're looking at that right now.
Okay. Anything else, Phil?
I don't know enough to ask more questions. That's my problem with this topic. Is it's fascinating when you think about the way like companies like NEMA have changed, or not really changed, made life easier in certain cases. Like I was just in somebody's house, they were looking at getting a Ford Lightning, and they were like, I said, "Do you have 220 in your garage?" And they're like, "I don't know." And I just walk in there, and I'm like, that's a NEMA 515, blah 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 blah, and name them off. And it's just you just know, like I could just look at the thing and I know what it is, and that it's these kind of standards in the work put in that make things so much easier down the line that I'm not looking at like five different plug types in the garage. I know basically there's going to be like two, maybe a third type of plug in there, but it makes things easier. And I can only imagine on the other end of the like installers, manufacturers, everything, that being handed a booklet that says this is what this is
Basically,
what
best
works.
practices. Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is what
Yeah.
an industry has come together and decided upon this. And we've all agreed here.
Hmm.
I can only imagine like how much easier that makes life uh, for everybody.
Yeah,
So
good
it's
point. I mean, we span from lighting to wire to cable to transformers to industrial automation equipment to conduit to EV charging. That's
Hmm.
that's the electrical industry. That's our members, and we're the backbone of our
Hmm.
nation's energy system, right? And we're powering the electric future, right? And we're a key driver of infrastructure development and future growth. I mean, that's kind of our role in this space, right? And we all know the market is moving towards electrification. The infrastructure is that key piece, and
Hmm.
that's what we do, right?
Yeah. If I could editorialize for a second here, I think one of the reasons EVs haven't taken off more than they have. And, obviously in California, they're already a quarter of the market. But I think a lot of people I've talked to, they're resistant to it because EVs seem like, at least in their eyes, like a bigger pain to own than a benefit. Whereas I think this standard specifically, I think would really unlock a lot of value for customers
Yeah.
in the sense that they're like, oh, if there's a power outage, it'll just, it'll just automatically switch to my car and I could, run my house for like, a week off my car rather than, sitting around and, just, you know, eating, pork and beans and, I don't know.
Well, and
But I
in
could
my
still
case,
live a normal life, even, where there's chaos all around me. But
yeah, I have to go and drag my generator out and then plug that thing in. And before I had the setup that I've got now, I was running cables everywhere, extension cords everywhere. And the idea that you could buy a house like a new construction, or even if it was a retrofitted older thing, and it would just kind of work and
mhm,
communicate, and it was designed to work, and do all of this. It sounds great to me. Like, I'm in.
mhm.
You
Yeah.
know, it
Yeah.
sounds
And
easy.
so, I think it's the more the message gets out and the more they realize the value in this. And I mean, this would even go down to like the dealership saying, hey, you get this and guess what? It can do this now. People be like, oh, wow, that's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, we know EVs are political and they will likely be for a while, but there's,
Hmm.
you've got to have the infrastructure, right? And
Hmm.
there's, your point is right on about resiliency and, in the event of of helping the grid become more stable. Um, providing that convenience for a
Hmm.
customer that wants to choose an EV, that the infrastructure's there. It's a seamless charging experience. The market's going to grow. I mean, it
Sure.
just may take a while longer, but it's still growing.
Yeah.
People are still buying EVs. I mean,
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'd like to think, convenience is the one thing that is not political. Everyone wants something that's more convenient, more useful,
and
you know.
saves cost and saves
Yeah,
cost, overall
exactly.
cost.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
So anyway, well, Steve,
Well,
I
how
mean,
how do people find
yeah,
out more about NEMA?
yes.
So
Or
yeah,
this and this standard? Like how?
Oh, and I
yeah,
and you do have a new
yes.
website
We,
specifically regarding this, so I'm
yes,
sure you
we,
want to
we
plug
actually
that.
went through a rebrand, a new website. It's called nakedelectric.org, nakedelectric.org. To find out more about NEMA, you can welcome to contact me directly. My email is steve.griffith@nema.org to talk about NEMA and the standard. But happy to talk to anyone that's interested about, NEMA and the work we're doing in this sector.
Okay. Excellent. I'm
Excellent.
I'm I'm really glad we had you on, and like I said, I think this is a really big development. I know we're just at the beginning stages of it, but I think this really could have a really transformative effect on infrastructure, on the EV market, on consumer perception. I just, you know, I'm really jazzed about it. So,
Cool. Well, thanks for, reaching out to us. I'm glad to be participating. I'm looking forward to, spreading the word.
all right.